Howdy, everybody. Thanks for joining me here for another Radium episode. As you can see by the thumbnail, the sun's source. Um, yeah, I had kind of hinted at this video for a little while. Depending on how much time I have, we might go a little further into the concepts of radium, the firmament, the stars in the heavens, and transition into comets. Um, This is going to also segue into our discussions about CERN and colliding atoms and how radium played a crucial role in that, and CERN's development coming from this. And Madame Curie has a statue at CERN. She's the face of the discovery of radium. But really, it was credited to her, but the existence of it was already well established and had been known through alchemical writings and advanced races of the past and so on and so forth. But yeah, your time is precious. Thank you again for joining me. We're not going to waste any time here. Yeah, as I've mentioned before, I got my birthday's coming up, and I got a ton going on, taking a bunch of time off work. Birthdays, so many of my family members and my own children, lots of Geminis and Cancers and Leos in my family. And yeah, it's just been a super busy month, and July is going to be no different. Kind of an announcement, I got a exciting 4th of July video planned. I'm going to try and do a live stream. I'm also going to get back into Anomalous America. So thank you for being patient with me. The Mississippi episode is pretty much completed and ready to do the video. But Tuesday will be a July 4th episode. We'll be talking about the ancient history of the inhabitants of America, Isis, the fleur-de-lis, corn worship, corn ceremony, and King Tartar, the Tartar King of America. His birthday or his celebration day was on July 4th, the origins of July 4th, and what that means. But yeah, so time is precious. Let's jump right into this article here. Okay. This is from 1905, the Minneapolis Journal. The article is called Wonderful Conclusions Drawn from Radioactivity. Oh, also another announcement. I plan on I have a podcast coming out. I've mentioned this a few times over the last month. It's going to be Archivist Raw Radio. And yeah, first episode is just going to kind of be an introduction to myself, my background for those who aren't familiar, some of the overlapping ideas I plan on covering in the podcast, the direction I'm going to take it, and kind of just some overlapping ideas that I have. If you've heard any of my interviews with Greg at the Higher Side Chats, you'll kind of get you'll have a little bit of a background for the information I plan on covering in that, but something to look forward to. I'm going to try and get that done on my time off. We'll see, time permitting. But yeah, let's just get right into the article here. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for being here as always. Thanks for the continued support. So yeah, wonderful conclusions drawn from radium right here in the middle. I'm going to zoom in, give everybody a better view. Like I said, Minneapolis, 1905. A discussion of the new knowledge of matter, the breaking up of the atom, and some of the momentous consequences involved. The sun may not be going into decline after all. And kind of the theme. Also, if you haven't seen my Scarab Beetle video from yesterday, I strongly recommend watching that, as it does have many overlays. And I did consider having that part of the Radium series, but due to time restraints, my time for recording is limited to about 30 minutes a day at the most. Crazy, I know. But yeah, so the New York Herald. The world is divided between men who know and cannot tell, and men who tell and cannot know. The great expositors are dead. Huxley, Tyndall, and all the others, and the great expositor of the future, the interpreter of knowledge to the people, has still to be born. These sentences have been quoted from a book entitled The New Knowledge by a certain Professor Duncan, which has recently been published by A.S. Barnes & Co. Despite his modest disclaimer that he himself falls under the burden of these difficult conditions, the lay reader into whose hands this book may fall is likely to rise up and call himself blessed. Radioactivity of matter. Radioactivity, that new and startling property of matter on which the new knowledge chiefly relies, but discovered by Henry Becquerel, murder that name, my apologies, Becquerel, but no scientific discovery comes into the world parentless of previous conception. Not to delve too deeply into the genealogy of this discovery, let us say that its immediate progenitor was the X-ray. From the day, says Becquerel, on which I first had knowledge of the discovery of Professor Rotenden, there came to me too the idea of seeing whether the property of emitting very penetrating rays was not intimately bound up with phosphorescence. Becquerel uses the qualifying term too because other scientists had started upon the same line of investigation. The importance of his work and the luck of it was that he experimented with different substances. Out of all the substances tried, there was one, uranium, that had waited long for this one precious day. It is impossible now to enter into technicalities. Suffice it to say, Mr. Becquerel's experiments prove that uranium and its compounds spontaneously emit rays which are able to traverse opaque bodies and affect photographic plates. Now, uranium is an element extracted from a compound named pitchblende. Professor Pierre Curie of Paris and his wife happened to observe that pitchblende in the rough is more strongly radioactive than the uranium extracted from it. Very important. Links back with the Anomalous America episodes and how much pitchblende they were actually finding all across the devastated American Southwest. There is a correlation, I believe, to cataclysmic events and destruction of huge populaces. Nature never insults us by caprice. Consequently, we find the Curies saying, it becomes then very probable that if pitchblende has so strong an activity, it is because the mineral contains in some small quantities a substance wonderfully radioactive, different from uranium or any other element now known. Experiments justified the shrewdness of this guess. They ended in the discovery of 3 new elements with transcendent ray-emitting powers: radium, polonium, and actinium. Radium, with its radioactive power 130,000 times greater than uranium, placed in the hands of investigators a mighty engine of research, whose possibilities are practically illimitable. Yet it is free state. It has never been seen by human eye, nor touched by human hand. It has never been isolated, and has been studied only in combination with other elements, chiefly in the form of chloride or bromide. Now, why it's important to go back, if you haven't seen the previous episodes in this Radium series, check the playlist. The first episode of this, we show that contrary to the narrative that's being published here, radium had been isolated and was being used in advanced aeronautics and anti-gravitic craft, even before the United States and the Curie family were gifted the so-called discovery of radium. It was already well known, and we correlated it with the German secret societies, the NIMSA group of California, their correlation to their flying ships that were spotted all over the Californias in the late 1800s. And the Trump relation is really interesting, and we'll get into that further down the road. The amount of radium in pitchblende is less than 1/10,000,000%. It is relatively rarer than gold and seawater. Polonium and actinium are even rarer. The difficulties of extraction are immense. A ton of pitchblende will yield only barely the 100th part of a grain of radium. Now, a ton of pitchblende is worth $100. Therefore, a gram of radium would cost in material and labor a good deal more than $10,000. 3 types of rays. Radium gives off 3 distinct types of rays, named respectively alpha, beta, and gamma. Now, this is important because, as we touched on in my scarab video that I posted yesterday, please go check that out if you haven't seen it. I have been hypothesizing for a long time that a lot of these mythos and hero characters are based on active elements. And there's no coincidence here. I do believe that the Greek and alphanumeric letters and music tones and all of these things, music being based on vibration, as is radium, and the rays, alpha, beta, gamma. The alpha rays correspond to the ions, or tiny particles laden with positive electrification, which fly off from gas flames in red hot metals, save that they do not require high temperature or other exceptional conditions. On the contrary, they fly off from the substance radium in its normal state. Like ions, each particle has a mass about twice the mass of the hydrogen atom. Like ions also, the alpha rays have a velocity of 20,000 miles per second. Now, as we get farther into this, we're going to show that the radium rays are near the speed of light, showing its relation to the sun. It's very important. It is a property of radium to cause certain substances in its neighborhood to phosphorescence, or light up with a glow. Huge. I've even gone as far as hypothesizing that a lot of the radium comes from titans, or giant animals, or giant trees that had phosphorescence, and radium has been directly linked to these animals that have phosphorescence. Mushrooms, sea creatures, they glow and have phosphorescence, very much related to radium. And think of Avatar. Zinc sulfide is such a substance, answering to the bombardment of the alpha rays alone. Sir William Crookes has devised an instrument called a Spintheroscope, which shows beautifully the bombardment of alpha rays. It consists of a small fragment of radium placed behind a zinc sulfide screen, which is viewed in the dark through a tube containing a magnifying eyepiece. Remember this part, because it'll correlate to one more article we're going to get into, depending on time. The beta rays are the most spectacular. They consist of negatively charged corpuscles, approximately 1/2000th the size of the constituting the alpha rays. In every particular save that of velocity, the beta rays resemble corpuscles of candle flames and of cathode rays produced by an electric discharge inside of Crookes tubes. Very interesting. Again, I think this correlates to the plasma effects and the historical narrative of plasma and the sun and the birth of the sun and how it came into being, and plasma discharge, the scarring of Earth, the falling of the vapor canopy. Perhaps these events were all wrapped up into one event. The beta rays fly faster, for they reach the enormous average velocity of more than 100,000 miles a second, just like the speed of light, folks. We have here not an analogy nor a similarity, but an identity. The beta rays from radium are corpuscles, for they possess the same properties and in the same degree within the limits of experimental error. What a wonder, then, have we here. An innocent-looking little pitch of white salt, not so different from its general properties from ordinary table salt, yet possessed of special properties utterly beyond even the fanciful imaginings of men of the past time. This makes me think of Medusa and the Pillars of Salt, right? Medusa being an analogy for some kind of plasma event, and what role perhaps our sun and the radium plays in this. The bacterial ray of radium, on the contrary, arise from a substance dug out of the ground, which will emit them apparently for centuries in the future, as it has emitted them apparently through countless centuries of the past, without any intrinsic influence. It is their nature, intrinsic property, a new property of matter, radioactivity. Breaking up the atom. Wonders succeed to wonders as the meaning of these new discoveries crowd upon us. Let us take another phase of the subject. Radium, with an atomic weight of 225, is the heaviest of all the elements save uranium and thorium. Helium, with an atomic weight of 4, is the lightest of all, save only hydrogen. Now, 9 years ago, it was predicted that if atoms are really systems of electrons or corpuscles, which seem to be convertible terms, we must sometimes find such a system in the act of breaking up. Further, it was predicted that the breaking up would occur in some element of great atomic weight that has the most complicated arrangement of electrons to form its atom. It is estimated that it takes 160,000 electrons in orbital motion to form a single radium atom. Therefore, it is indefinitely more likely for radium to decompose than for hydrogen with its atomic weight of 1 and its 700 electrons, since the most complex machinery is the most likely to break down. And the high vibratory rate of radium and its amount of electrons are very interesting here. The facts have exactly borne out the prophecy. There is nothing, it might be incidentally noted, which establishes so firmly the fact of the stability and harmony of the new knowledge as the prophetic faculty which it endows its professors, but to proof. If you can find radium in a Spintheroscope and wait a little, there appears in the tube a minute quantity of a gas which has not there before. The spectrum of this gas is quite different from that of any known substance. But wait 4 weeks longer, then this unknown gas, called provisionally radium emanation, will be found to have changed into the well-known gas helium. Now, I've talked about this before, and this cannot be overlooked. This is incredibly important. Radium, as it doesn't break down, but as it emits light, a byproduct of this emanation is helium. Now, just think of this when we're talking about the blimps and the Zeppelin, the Graf Zeppelin age, and the Germans, remember, had a 30-year head start on anyone else. I would say even maybe more like 50. So much so that they had mined all of the radium of Europe and were now turning to America and owned all the mines in Mexico and South America. And they had already claimed that they had a perpetual steam engine that was using radium. Now, a byproduct of this would be not only electricity, but helium. There you have a ship that can run forever and stay aloft forever. Now, radium is an element. Helium is an element. So here, the astonishing fact is established that certain elements, uranium and thorium, share the property with radium, which have as might right to the title of elements, as any others break down or become transmuted into certain other elements, also with a perfect right to the title. Certain of these transmuted elements have but a brief span of existence, and are but halfway stages to some final products of decomposition. The dream of the alchemist of the Middle Ages has been realized. The prophecy of the chemist of last century has been fulfilled. Says Professor Duncan, today we believe that the alchemists were right, that matter is not only transmutable, but transmuting, and this without the aid of any philosopher's stone, diabolic influences, or even the modern appliances of a scientific laboratory. Nay, in spite of them, for apparently no human effort can either aid or hinder this process. It seems to be the very symbol of inevitability. Radium is ever giving out a large quantity of those rays, which we call heat. Whatever the temperature of its surrounding, it is always a little hotter. So powerful is this action, says C. Salaby, an English rival to the Professor Duncan, that if you could obtain a sufficient supply of radium, probably half a pound would be quite enough. It would keep a room warm not merely during your lifetime, but for hundreds of generations after you. Is there radium in the sun? It has not yet been detected there, but there is helium in the sun. Indeed, this gas, which derives its very name from Helios, the sun, was detected in the solar spectrum long before any samples were in the hands of chemists. Of this planet, if the helium of the Earth is produced from radium, quite possibly the sun's rays have this same source, and indeed they do. The sun is saved. Now see what tremendous consequences must follow. For many years, there has been a quarrel between the physicists and the geologists as to the age of the Earth and the sun. The geologists have insisted that the crust of the Earth, whose phenomena are due to solar influences, show 1,000 million years of past existence. The physicists, basing their calculations upon the theory that the sun's heat has been maintained simply by its own contraction from a nebular condition, have refused to grant more than from 18 to 20 million years. No conclusion of geometry, said Young, is more certain than this, that the contraction of the sun to its present size from a diameter even many times greater than Neptune's orbit cannot have been emitting heat at its present rate for more than 18 million years. If its heat has really been generating in this manner, there's a rub, for if there is radium in the sun, that orb has another source of heat energy. The gloomy predictions of the old physicists that the sun must run out of its fuel in 3 million years is likewise discredited. The modern physicists grant it 50 million years. The new knowledge has an even more audacious theory to suggest, namely, that our solar system, and indeed the entire universe, is self-regenerative. I love it. And that it is not losing its available energy, nor going steadily to a condition of rest and extinction. On our Earth, we find radium decomposing into helium. Is the reverse process possible in the hotter stars? Excuse me. As they cool, are helium and the lighter elements bound to run through the gamut until they end as radium or other of the heaviest elements and then pass back again to helium as radium passes back to helium on Earth? The problem is fraught with the most tremendous issues. The heavy elements of matter are undergoing a steady and inevitable decomposition with the continuous production of interelementary energy. Now, if the lighter elements were at the same time undergoing the reverse process, were, in fact, synthesizing themselves into the heavy elements with the absorption of energy, so that as much energy was collected by them in their growth as was wasted by the decomposition of the heavy elements in their decay, the universe of matter would keep its available energy constant. It would constitute a conservative system having neither beginning nor end. I love it. Unbelievable. Having neither beginning nor end, right? Nothing is wasted. Nothing dies. It is just reborn. And nothing proves this better than radium and our own sun. And the scarab beetle was symbolic of this and was a divine symbol of Autumn Ra. And how funny is that? Again, here we are in 1905, having these same questions, but as we're advancing along with our understandings of radium. Now, again, I believe these Atlanteans and those offshoots of it, the Atlanteans, um, described these elements as their gods and their deities. And yeah, Ra would be a perfect example of that. Now, I know I'm getting low on time, so I want to make sure we cover one more here. Okay. Again, thank you for being here. Share screen. Here we go. All right. We're going right in here in the middle. An atom of radium reaches St. Louis. Remember, we talked about the Spintheroscope in that article. And I want to show you what else they were finding with the Spintheroscope. This is from 1903, right? They mentioned this exact scientist and this device he created. He created this basically just to look at this. Washington University purchases Crookes Spintheroscope with minute quantity. Pitch blend, shines with stars. Emanations from mystery of science cause zinc sulfide screen to scintillate like galaxies of the universe. In the arrival yesterday of the Spintheroscope at Washington University, St. Louis is no longer without a sample of the greatest scientific wonder of the age, radium. The Spintheroscope is an instrument designed by Sir William Crookes to show one of the properties of radium, the scintillations that occur when the particles thrown off by the radium salt strike a screen of zinc blend. As a most minute and almost underweightable quantity of radium is sufficient to cause these characteristic little flashes of light. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here. It's kind of hard to read. Some of these articles can just not have the greatest resolution. So before we move on, we're looking at a rough representation of the Spintheroscope. Spintheroscope. Here it is. Okay, right here. We're looking at the screen. Scintillations. Okay, radium zinc sulfide screen. Think of this like the firmament and radium beyond the firmament in the waters above. Characteristics sufficient to cause the characteristic little flashes of light. The instrument is in the reach of all colleges and institutions of learning. The Spintheroscope is a small brass tube closed at one end, the other bearing a lens. This is all that's shown when the instrument is looked at in the light. Take it into the dark room, and after the eye has become accustomed to the darkness, a wonderful phenomenon takes place. The tube begins to glow, or rather, the glow from the tube becomes apparent to the eye. A faint blush light that becomes stronger and stronger. The longer one looks is seen. One might take it for the glow of a stick of phosphorus, or the light that is given off when a handful of parlor matches are gently rubbed with a moist substance. Such is the appearance of the tube when held at a distance from the eye. Marvelous sight seen. Look through the lens and focus the tube by sliding the end bearing the lens in and out, and soon a marvelous sight meets the eye. Sir William Crookes, the discoverer of this curious phenomenon, said in describing the instrument, "It was as though I saw the universe as it may appear to its maker. Whole galaxies of stars flashing in view only to disappear and have others take their place. Each separate article impinged upon the screen of zinc blend appeared to the sight as a star. Not as single stars did the phenomenon show itself, but as a whole universe coming into being at once, making their sharp flashes and then disappearing to have their places taken by others. It is an expression of the infinite that infinite minds may grasp. Smallest body known. The radium ray is the smallest body that is known. It is so much smaller than the atom, which was regarded as the smallest. possible quantity of matter that could exist. That if the atom were magnified to the size of an orange, the particles that radium is continually throwing off would be visible under the microscope. That these emanations have corporate existence has been proven by a number of methods, all tending to confirm the original investigations of Lord Kelvin, who was the first to measure them. They and other similar phenomena, such as the X-rays, were formerly supposed to be a peculiar kind of light and were regarded as waves in the ether movements and not bodies. The radium in the Washington University Spintheroscope is in the form of radium bromide and has a radioactivity of 300,000 the power of uranium to ionized air being taken as the standard. The instrument will not be placed on public exhibition for some time. Public lectures may be given at a later date when the Spintheroscope is exhibited. Apologies. So yeah, the instrument will not be placed on public exhibition for some time. Of course, they have much to learn. The fact that even this amount of information reaches the public is so fascinating and fantastic, and why I've fallen in love with these newspapers over the last several years. So much to talk about in there. Yeah. When we talk about zinc, salt, and the fact that when viewed with the right device, the radium looks like a galaxy, right? And we just spent the previous few minutes discussing the relation of the sun and its creation and how it's directly related to helium, and the sun and radium's breakdown derive helium just as part of its action. And when we talk about lead to gold, we're talking about lead to radium. We're talking about density and the recycling that happens, and then how radium is at the very end, and its breakdown, its emanations create helium. And yeah, I want to finish this off with a small little excerpt. I had much more to talk about, but I'm out of time. So I want to zoom in right here real quick. Is the sun radium? 1916. Is the sun radium? There is no doubt, says Walter Maunder, writing on the origin of the sun's heat, that the discovery of radium compels us to abandon completely some of the conclusions based upon present theories of the origin of the sun's heat. W.E. Wilson calculates that 3.6 grams of radium per cubic meter of the sun's volume would supply the entire output of the sun's energy. He further suggests that the temperature of the sun radium may be much more energetic at our terrestrial temperatures. If so, a much smaller weight of radium per cubic meter may suffice. The computations which Lord Kelvin and other leading men of science have made as to the possible length of time in the past and in the future during which the sun could maintain its present energy of radiation are necessarily entirely set aside, for we can no longer assume that the concentration of the sun's substance from indefinite distance has been the sole or even the chief source of its energy. It is not only that radium itself may exist in sufficient abundance in the sun to account for its energy, but the same or similar radioactive properties may be possessed by others in its elements, or by the sun itself as a whole. or by the sun itself as a whole. Exactly. Professor G.H. Darwin, this is Darwin's father, believe it or not, writes, knowing as we know now, do, that an atom of matter is capable of containing an enormous store of energy in itself, I think that we have no right to assume that the sun is incapable of liberating atomic energy to a degree at least comparable with that which it would do if made of radium. Exactly. I'm going to give you a little teaser for probably the next episode, what we're going to talk about. And it's called Artificial Radium Rays Are Created. Unlimited voltage furthers atomic research into the field of nuclei. Artificial production of rays, hitherto secured only from radium, has been accomplished at the Terrestrial Magnetism Laboratory of the Carnegie Institution of Washington, with a specially constructed vacuum tube on which can be impressed as much as 2 million volts of electricity. By this means, it is possible to shoot, almost at the speed of light, heavy atomic projectiles under controlled conditions against other atoms. Sound familiar? We're going to correlate this and much more with Madame Curie, why her statue exists at CERN, and much, much more. And we're going to come at it from a symbolic standpoint, bring in Shiva the Destroyer, and much more. So I hope you're enjoying this series. Be sure to leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And thank you again for joining me. Have a wonderful day. Stay tuned. Bye, guys. Appreciate it.